Hello, my name is Amanda from the Workforce Centers of South Central Kansas. I'm the resource coordinator here and teach the workshops. The workshop that we'll be covering today is our Introduction to Excel class. We will go over a lot of the basics for Introduction to Excel, including starting the program, navigating the ribbon, changing views, creating a new workbook, saving workbooks, editing the contents within the workbooks, modifying the cells, and using some other basic tools and features, as well as printing Excel spreadsheets. This first exercise is going to provide you instruction on how to typically open the Excel program, in addition to exploring the ribbon and changing the view once the program is open. So due to technical issues, it won't actually allow me to show you how you would get to Excel from this screenshot or recording. I can kind of show you by pointing to some areas. Once I click too far, it shuts this recording off. So on most computers, you're going to have a start menu down in the lower left-hand corner if you're using a Microsoft Windows computer. That is generally where you're going to go. Once you click, it should open up a menu, and that should be in alphabetical order, and you would go to the E and find the one that is Excel. If you can't find it there, sometimes it is stored under the M's under Microsoft Office, and you can find all of the programs, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, under that component. Or you should have a magnifying glass. You could also do a quick search, type Excel, and it should find it on your computer. Once you've found the Excel program on your computer, then you should be able to click on it, and eventually you'll land on the screen that you are seeing now, or something similar. Prior to getting here, you may have some pop-ups. I know that happens a lot in our classroom environment even. And so you'll just want to either click OK or close out of them if there are some additional advertisements or pop-ups that pop up. Eventually, you should work your way to what you see now. And it should give you the option to click on a blank workbook. Sometimes on your computer, you may even see multiple other options of additional templates, which are showing not available at this time for me. So you may have more than one option at this page, but you should definitely at least see blank workbook. One other thing I should mention here is that I am working on a Microsoft Office 2016 version, so this is Excel 2016. If you are using anything older, there may be some slight discrepancies, but most often it's almost identical, and you should be able to follow along fairly easily. But there could be some minor differences as we go along. So you'll just want to keep that in mind. So to begin a new workbook, you would just double click blank workbook. So here's our workbook. If you've taken our Word class, if you haven't, it's online on our YouTube channel. I encourage you to check it out. Word and Excel have some similarities. As with Word and Excel, this is your ribbon. And so we're going to talk about your ribbon and kind of explore that. At the very top of your ribbon, you have tabs. And so as you click on the different tabs, your ribbon will change, and it'll give you new options. Typically in the classroom environment, I will usually provide a three-part instruction, like go to the Insert tab, find the Illustrations group, and then click Pictures. So each of these are the group. So tables, illustration, add-ins, charts, and it's separated by a horizontal line. So that gives you an idea, if you know where the group is, that the button that you're searching for is within that area. And then the third part of the instruction is the actual button you'll click. Sometimes people lose their ribbon, or maybe you don't even see your ribbon right now and you're wondering why you don't see that. Don't pay so much attention to this just yet, but sometimes you might just see a page like this. And what that means is that your ribbon is not locked in, it has not been pinned so that you don't lose it. If you click home, your ribbon will come back. But the problem is when you click into one of these cells, now our ribbon disappears. So for most of you, if you are not seeing your ribbon now, you'll want to click home. If when you look at this page and you come over to the far right and you see a thumbtack, that means your ribbon is not locked in. You're going to want to lock your ribbon in so that your ribbon doesn't disappear every time you click into a cell. So we'll just click the ribbon, or the pin, I'm sorry, and then now it should lock in. So now I clicked into the cell, our ribbon stayed. And so that's really the way you'll want to keep your ribbon, is locked in. And you'll know it's locked in if it just kind of has this little up arrow. You don't got to worry about it. But if for some reason you accidentally click the little up arrow, that will unpin your ribbon. You'll go to home and you'll click the thumbtack again to pin it back. So I feel we're in a good place now to really dive in to the ribbon in a little bit more detail here. So I would just go through and on your own, when you pull up Excel, explore, what options you have within each segment. So you've got page layout, you've got formulas, data, review, and view. And this M-Files one you should not actually have on your computer. This is something internal, so don't worry about that. At the top of the tabs, you will have what's called the quick access or launch bar. And this is where your save, undo, and redo buttons are. At the very bottom, I'm going to show you how to change your view. The very bottom of your page here, you'll have a kind of a grid. That's your normal view. And then you've got page layout, and then you've got your page break view. So if we wanted to change the way that this page looked, we could click on these different views to see how that changes it. So this one shows the header, or if we go down here to the footer, our page break view. I don't know why it's not showing as much, I guess because we don't have anything entered here. So that will show you just kind of how you could change the view once you have the data entered. This now also is showing us where the page break is, this dotted line. So if you're doing a document and you're over here to J, you would realize that this is going to now be printing on the second page because this is where our page break is. There's another way that you can switch your view, and that's by going to the View tab. And in the Workbook Views group, you have Normal, Page Break View, and Page Layout View. So it looks very similar to what we found down here. And that's really the key, is that almost anything you can do within the program, there's usually multiple ways to do that. And more than one way that you can accomplish the same goal. So I'll show you typically multiple ways or the shortcut ways in addition to the way that maybe is most common. That will wrap up this first exercise. So we've gone over how to get to the Excel program by finding it on your computer through the Start menu or the Search. And then we've talked about the ribbon, how to lock your ribbon in, your tabs, the quick launch bar, and how to change our views either from the bottom of the screen or by clicking on the View tab. For this exercise, I'm going to show you how to create a new workbook, save a workbook, open an existing workbook, and switch between those workbooks. Right now, we have an existing workbook already pulled up. And the name of our workbook here is Table Formatting Practice. So to open a new workbook, if I decided I want to be able to start from scratch, we could go to File, and then New. And from here, we would be able to select Blank Workbook. So I'm going to type a few things in just so that we have something to save. Okay. And as a moment ago, I showed you what the name of that last workbook was. This one is just a default name of Book 3. You probably want to remember that name when you go to find your document. So you're going to want to save this and save it in a place you'll be able to find it, and also name it something you'll remember. So to save, you'll go File, Save As. Whenever you're saving something for the first time, you're going to choose Save As, because that allows you to tell it where you want to save it and what you want to save it as. So now you'll see that I've got the option to click my desktop here, because I've already accessed it earlier today. Some computers may be slightly different, so I'm going to show you both ways. I almost always encourage, especially if you haven't been very familiar with saving documents to certain files or knowing where they're being stored at on your computer, is to save it to your desktop, because it's going to be easier for you to find. So I could click Desktop, or I could click Browse over here. It's going to lead us to the same pop-up box that allows us to name it and decide where we want to store it. So I'm going to click Browse just because that may be the most common one that everybody would see. So I'll go to Browse, and if I had clicked Desktop, this same box would have appeared. Okay. So since I told you that I would normally save it to the desktop, we're going to come over here to the left-hand side. I call this your storage cabinet, your filing cabinet. And we're going to pick our desktop filing cabinet that we want to store this in. You'll then change the name. So if I wanted to make this be, let's say Workforce Centers Practice Document 2020. Okay. You could put whatever you want the name to be there. It tells you it's going to save it as an Excel workbook. Most of the time you're going to leave that unless for some reason you were changing it as needed. And then you're just going to click Save. So it's going to go to our desktop. It's going to be saved as Workforce Centers Practice Document 2020. So we click Save. Awesome. And we know it's been saved as this new document here because we have the new name at the top. If I were to make, a simple change like add the address, we wouldn't have to go through all those steps. There's a shorter way to save. You can click the little floppy disk up here, and that will, if you click Save, that has now updated the change that I just made by adding the address without having to go through to select where we want to store it, what we want to name it, because it's going to store it in the same place and it's going to keep the document name the same. So if we want to open an existing workbook, so maybe I want to find another workbook that I'm not in yet that I've already saved to my desktop. So you could go File, and then you're going to go Open to find an existing workbook. You would need to find out, though, where you stored it to. And if you're anything like me, usually I'm storing it to my desktop. So again, you're going to click Browse, which will bring up our little pop-up box here. And we can say we're going to go to our desktop to find it, because I believe that's where I've stored it at. And you may have stored it in a file folder or it could be an example of just sitting there on your desktop and there's the file name right there. So I've recently kind of cleaned up my desktop and I didn't get real creative with my name here. So here's random chunk cleaning off my desktop. So I think that there's some Excel files in here that I could open up. So I'm going to click on that one. And so let's say I want to open up, let's say, Sales Reference Practice. Okay, awesome. So that's how I was able to open up an existing file. With that, now you can go down to the taskbar, which is where you put certain projects on hold, and you should now be able to scroll over and toggle between each workshop. Not workshop, but workbook. Or so once you've created a new workbook, you've saved it, then you can also, go back and forth between all of the ones that you've had opened or you've saved or created just by going down to the taskbar and clicking on them. You'll notice in the taskbar you can even go to other programs. So I've had some PowerPoints open recently. So if you go to that taskbar, that's how you can switch between programs or documents. And that wraps up creating, saving, opening, and switching between workbooks. Now that you've learned how to open an existing document, create a new one, toggle between worksheets, we're going to focus more on the actual worksheet itself and navigating, a little bit more in-depth navigation, in addition to editing contents within the cells and widening the cells. This first exercise, I'm going to use our Understanding Excel practice, since it's mostly filled in already, to show you some navigational tricks. Right now, I'm going to scroll up to the very top just so that we can see how these tricks work. So let me get to the top of my page. So the top of the page is the A1 coordinate. And what I'm going to do is on my keyboard, I'm going to press Control and End. And what that did was it took us to the very end of the document. So now we are technically row 105, and it moved our cursor to column H. So if you're wanting to go to the bottom of your document to find out a grand total really quickly, just the Control and End will work. If we want to go back to the top where we were, so we can see A1, you would press Control and Home on your keyboard. And now we are back to A1. This is considered the name box where you see A1, and so it will tell you which box you're in each time. And that's the name box. You can actually type in this box, which is kind of a neat shortcut, especially if you know I need to go to C50, let's just say. And we can't see C50 right now because it only goes down to 36 on our screen, and we just want to jump there really fast. I can type in C50, and now look, our cursor, we've got our cell that has got the green border around it in C50. So the name box will either tell you what cell you're in by clicking on it, or you can type in your name box the cell you would like to go to. If we press Control and the down arrow on your keyboard, it will take you to the last row of data. And this one, I'm going to scroll back up here because I don't know that this did it correctly. So Control and the down arrow. So yes. So it's the last row of data, but it's per the category that you're in. So right now we're in this category of tools. So it's going to take us to the last row of the data for the tools. Depending on how your worksheet is set up, it may take you to the last row for the entire worksheet, but this worksheet is broken up into many sections, and so it's bringing us to the last row before we get to a total section. If we press Control and right arrow, it should take us to the last column of data. In this case, that is column C. And I'll go ahead and press Control Home again. And again, it takes us to the very top. So we're going to go back to our document customer tracker. And I'm going to type in a few things here to get us started. I'm going to type in Workforce Centers in A1. And so what I want to point out here is that you'll see that in A1 we've typed, and you see Workforce Centers. You will also see that in the formula bar, and that's what we call this part up here, where it says Workforce Centers, the formula bar. Once we hit enter, you'll see that it went down a line, and there's nothing in the cell, nothing in the formula bar. If I click back to A1, it will show us in A1, it says Workforce Centers. If you just look at the cell of the spreadsheet, it actually looks like Workforce Centers crosses over into cell B1, but it actually does not. Okay? If I click in B1, and a lot of times in the classroom, I know this becomes tricky, that people will think that they can't type in B1 because something is there. When we click B1, there, even though we see centers here, in this formula bar, centers is not there. And that will show you that that is not actually has anything in that box. So this is where widening the columns really becomes handy, so that you can really see what you're working with, so that you're not seeing the overlap like this. So I want to show you how to edit the cell's contents. So if we wanted to take the centers off, we would need to click in cell A1, and you can even type here in the formula bar, and let's just change this to Alliance. And then if we hit enter, now it says Workforce Alliance. If we press tab, it moves us over to the next field, which will look like it has Alliance in there, and that we would have difficulty typing it. But now what I want you to do is in cell B1, we will go ahead and type here, let's say the address, 2021 North Amidon. And so now that I've typed in the address here in B1, you'll notice that now I don't see Workforce Alliance at all. We just see Workforce, and it's actually kind of cut off. But if we click in cell A1, it does show that it's still Workforce Alliance. Okay, so in cell A4, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to type in customer name. In B1, I'm going to write customer number. And customer number. And then I'm going to put service requested in C4, okay, for our customer tracker. So right now we've got all of this here. You can't see it very well. So this is where widening the column will become in handy. And there's 3 ways you can widen the column. So I'm going to show you all 3. There's a really easy way, more simpler way, and a more challenging, or the way that I always forget you can even do. So like I said, there's usually more than one way to do something. So the first way that you can do widen the column is to move the mouse pointer between columns A and B, and you should get a double-headed arrow. Do you see the double-headed arrow? And double-click. And what that will do is it will widen the column to whatever the longest word is in that column. So it didn't adjust it to customer name, but rather to the Workforce Alliance, because that one is longer. So now if we were to widen column B, because we still need to widen it as well, what you can do is you can actually highlight the entire column B by clicking on it. You'll see the down arrow where the letter B is. And on the Home tab, so we're on the Home tab, in the Cells group, so this is our Cells group, we're going to click the Format drop-down, and we're going to click Auto Fit Column Width. And so once again, it also made it the full width of whatever the longest one is. Now the last one here. And this is going to be by putting the cursor between columns C and D. We've got the double-headed arrow, but you can also drag. So you click on your mouse and you drag it as long as you like it. Now, the thing about some of the auto-fit ones that's kind of nice is it makes it consistent. Where if we're dragging, you know, I mean, I could still do something like this and it doesn't look like it fits very well. So I usually recommend, my preference of choice is to get between the columns and just do the double click. And it's just that simple. Now you've widened the column for you to be able to see that. So in this section, we've learned some shortcuts to navigate the worksheet, like Control and End, for example, Control and Home. We learned about the name box. We've also shown how to edit the contents by clicking in the cell, and how to widen the columns. So for this section, I'm going to actually show you how to modify the font, the size, the color, how to use cut, copy, and paste, and Format Painter. If you're not aware of what Format Painter is, it is a lifesaver. Trust me, you'll want to stay tuned for this. So first thing, before we can use all of those cool tools, let's go ahead and change the style of the font, the size of the font, and the color of the font. I'm going to start with just changing one cell at this moment. So to change that information, I'm going to click in cell A1 to change our Workforce Alliance and the way it appears. I like the font style Georgia. So we'll go to the font group, we'll click the drop down arrow, and we will go to the font style Georgia. Okay, so it's moved it to Georgia style. We will change this to font size 24, so we'll use the drop down arrow. And then I really like the dark blue color, so I will go to the A with the little color bar underneath it, use the drop down arrow, and we'll find the dark blue color. Now what we found ourselves in a little predicament here, all the work we did to widen our columns has now been undone. If we go back between A and B, get our double-headed arrow and double click, now we'll be in the right width of our columns again. So we've got this here, Workforce Alliance in blue, Georgia, and size 24. Now generally you're going to want things to be consistent. So one way to do something for all of the words on the page, if you're wanting it to be that way. So what we could do is you could highlight, so select the field you want to be in, and then click and drag, and whatever area is covered in this green outline, if we went to that we want it to be this other font, size, let's say 26, and blue. Now everything is that particular font, color, and size, because we highlighted that particular area. Okay. Now, if we wanted to keep that up here, but maybe change the way this information looks down below, what we would end up doing, and I'm going to widen this column again because we're not quite right, and I'm going to widen this one again, and I'm going to widen that one again. So that's as quickly we were able to widen those columns just by double clicking. And I'm going to leave the way that it looks at the top here. I don't like the way this looks. Okay, so I'm going to go into A4, and I want to make this B, let's say Georgia. Okay, and I want to make this font a little bit smaller. It doesn't need to be so big. I'll make it 16. So if you were on this page and you started adding in additional fields and you weren't really sure what made customer name look this way, this is where Format Painter can come in handy. Is without even having to know that it's Georgia size 16 in the color, I can just click Format Painter and it gives this little dotted line around it showing you that it's taking that into consideration. And then it shows you a little paintbrush with a plus sign now, which shows us the Format Painter is on. When the Format Painter is on, all you have to do is click in the cell you want to change, and it will change the formatting. So the word's going to stay the same, but the formatting will change. We will now get the correct size, font, color, etc. by just clicking in this box. Now that looks the same. Now if I went to go over here to click, you'll notice my paintbrush is not there no more. So I have to still come back here, click Format Painter, and click in that box. Now it's been changed. Format Painter does also work if, I'm going to change this again just to give us some difference so you can notice the change. You can click here, go Format Painter, and you can click and drag, and now it has done the same thing. So if you highlight it, the Format Painter will go for each of those selections. And essentially the Format Painter, you know, even if this was a different color, if this was green, it's going to allow whatever the formatting is to be the same. And it can just come in so handy. It's been so helpful for me. I know that. So we've shown you how to change the style of the font, the size, and the color. We've also shown you the Format Painter to keep whatever that formatting is. Now I want to show you cut, copy, paste. So if we wanted to copy And so if we wanted to copy, you would highlight, and you could go to the clipboard where it says copy, and then you would go down to the next line where you want it to be as well. Now that it's selected, you would just click the top of where it says paste. So now we have a duplicate. If you want to cut something, usually you're cutting it because you're wanting to move it somewhere else. Let me add a few more things in here. Okay. So if I decide that I want to cut John out of here, then I would click John, click cut. And then I'd have to decide where I wanted it to go. Okay. So maybe I really needed him to be in space 14. So now I can hit paste. So now we've moved John clear down here. So the difference between copy and cut is copy is going to give you a duplicate, cut is just going to move it wherever you'd like it, or completely take it off if you're not wanting to repaste it back. There are shortcuts for cut, copy, and paste. I'll type them here. So the shortcut for copy is Control plus C. The shortcut for paste is Control plus V. And the shortcut for cut is Control plus X. So if I do Control C on my keyboard here, you see that it now has what I call these marching ands, or this dotted line. And I could paste it over here in the customer number by doing Control and V. Or if I decided I wanted to cut the Control X out of here, I could do Control X. And it should have cut. Oh, it should, yes, because I got to paste it now, right? So if I want to paste it here on the customer number, now do Control V, and now it has cut it. Those are the shortcuts, but there's one more shortcut. You can click in the field, right click on your mouse, and you will also get cut, copy, and paste options. So there's 3 ways to do that. That sums up cut, copy, paste, the format painter, and modifying the font. For this section, we're going to look at modifying the worksheet some more. We're going to look at how to insert cells, delete cells, insert and delete rows and columns, as well as hide and unhide rows or columns. I'll start with inserting a cell. Probably the easiest place for you to see this is for me to click in A12. And if we were to insert a cell, we're going to go to the Home tab, to the Cells group, and where it says Insert, we're going to click the drop down, and we're going to click Insert Cells. It should populate in between right now our current row 11 and 12, so we should have a cell between Control V and Control X. So we're going to shift the cell down to do that and click OK. So here we are. Try it one more time for you. I'll come up here to where it says Amanda, Amanda, and you'll be able to notice. Again, the cells group, insert, insert cells, shift cells down, and now it has given us an additional cell in between. If you want to delete a cell, let's say we don't want the cell any longer, should just be able to click Delete Cell. And this time it's going to shift the cell up. So it's going to enclose row 5 and 7 so that they are now on top of each other when we take row 6 out. So now that becomes row 6. If you're wanting to insert a row, you have to click on the outside of the number here where you see it's green. And so we'll click there, and you'll notice that highlights the entire row. And if we go insert sheet rows, and now it also inserted a sheet row and put a space between the two Amandas there. It'll generally always populate up, even if it doesn't ask you how you want to shift those cells. So I go to 12, insert, and I just click the top of it, and you notice it did the whole row. I didn't even hit the drop down. So that's another way to do that. If we want to delete, should be able to go to delete sheet rows, and it will bring it back as well. And as you've probably guessed, it works the same for the columns. You need to highlight or select where you want the column to be. And it should populate if we have column B highlighted. If we insert a new one, it should fall between A and B. But let's check it out. So insert sheet columns. And yes, here's where we inserted a new column, and it did fall between the A and the B. So now we have A, B, and C, and our B is empty. If you want to delete the column, now you just hit delete sheet column. Pretty simple. You can hide or unhide rows and columns as well. Now, why would you want to hide or unhide a column? Sometimes when you're doing a spreadsheet, and this has happened, you know, in real life for myself working with spreadsheets, is you may have a lot of different headers up here, and it may go clear off the page. But there may be some things that you use more frequently, like I need to know their name, I need to know their phone number, their email address. I don't always need to know their date of birth or other information that might not be as, you know, something I need readily available all the time. But maybe I do still need to have access to it, but I don't necessarily need to see it every time. So that can kind of condense your spreadsheet and bring it to where you can see it easier. So that's why you might want to hide a column. So let's say, you know, this was something we didn't really need to know, the customer number. We could go ahead and select this. If we right click it, we can click hide. So now it brings over service requested. I can see Amanda and whatever service she needs. I don't really need to know her customer number. Okay. We know that there's a column hidden here because of this little line, and you can hardly see it, but it shows that there's a placeholder there. If we want to bring it back, all we have to do is click really where that placeholder is and double click, and it'll bring the customer number back. So we can go to hide, or if you right click, you can click unhide. I always told you there's usually more than one way to do that. So I just need to get in the right place. It's much easier, I think, for me just to double click than to actually go to where it says unhide. There's also one other way to hide as well. On the Home tab, in the Format drop-down, you can see hide or unhide as well. So you can hide rows, columns, a sheet. So if we wanted to hide the columns, the column that we were in, that's how we would do that. Or if we wanted to hide this John Doe row, and so now the row is hidden, and you also see that little line there. Double click, should bring them back. That sums up inserting, deleting both of rows and columns and cells, in addition to hiding and unhiding rows and columns. During this next exercise, we're going to learn how to merge cells, wrap text, fill cells with color, and place borders around cells. These tools and features allow you to customize your worksheet really so that it's easier to read, more appealing to the eyes. And so that's what we'll focus on during this exercise. The first thing we're going to do is click in cell A1. And what I want to do is I want to make this Workforce Alliance spread out over the course of our columns here and center it. So I'll click in A1 and I'll highlight over to C1, and then I'll click Merge and Center, which is found on the Home tab, the Alignment group, Merge and Center. Do you see how that made that look much nicer here if this was going to be a spreadsheet and this is the title of our document? I'm going to do the same thing with the address to center it as well. So I'm clicking in now A2, taking my mouse, clicking and dragging to C2, and then clicking Merge and Center. If you have something that requires more of a yes or no answer, but the question is long, so I'm going to change this particular field, and I'm going to change it to have they visited the center before. So we see this question is quite long here. In order to make it shorter so that it's not going to take up clear to almost I, the column I here, we'll click in the field, and this is how you wrap text. And we will click in the alignment group, wrap text. So now it makes this column a little bit shorter, okay? Now, if you have something like customer number, which is not going over into the next column, and you click wrap text, it doesn't do anything. So if you've already widened the column, like this, the column's already the length that it needs to be, and you click wrap text, it's not going to do anything. The only time it will allow you to wrap text is if the column is already shorter than what it is. So like this, I could click wrap text, and of course I didn't do it exactly like I wanted. Let's try one more time. Wrap text, there we go. And that would then allow you to wrap the text to fit the column width that you have set up. The next thing that we will do is how to fill cells with color. If we wanted, it to be a little bit easier to read, maybe with a background color, you could choose to make, every other line be a certain color, All you have to do is click in the field, and then you're going to go to the font group and click the one that has the little paint bucket. And maybe I want to make this one be more of a gray. And that will fill the cells with a color. So then when I go in to put somebody's name here, and look, you can practice something that we learned before. If we go to Format Painter and click Tom, now it took all of the formatting that this one had previously. So actually the better option for us, if we wanted to keep it still gray would have been to take Jane and do Format Painter, and now we have Tom in the correct font. So we've learned how to fill the cells with color, so let's talk about how you place borders around the cells. So if we wanted to add a border, maybe around our headers here, we could do so. We would go to the Home tab, the Font group, and you'd have to click the Borders button down arrow, and that's the window pane here. And this allows you to see, do you want a bottom border, top border, left, right, all borders, a thick outside border, etc. What we'll do, because of this being our header, I think I just want a bottom border to kind of give us an outline. So I clicked here, bottom border, and a lot of times I like to click where it says more borders, because this will really allow you to customize it. So I want to give it a thick line that I can see. I want to make the color be a dark green. And then I'm going to designate which kind of border I want. Top, all around, bottom. And I'm going to click OK. So now you see I have this green border here. And I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to go to more borders. I'm going to change this to black. I want to be able to really see it, and you've got to click here to change it. You'll see in your preview box what it's doing, and click OK. If you want to give this all a border, all you have to do is highlight the sections you want to have the border. Again, go to more borders, select the border you want, select the color you want for your border, select where you want your border, and click OK. And so now we have that border there. For this section, we learned how to do merge and center to get a cell to take up more than one column. We have learned how to wrap text, so that way you can squeeze much more text in a field but keep the column width smaller. It will make the height larger, but the width will be smaller. We have also learned how to fill the cells with a background color if we should desire to do that. And then how to place a border. For this segment, we're going to look at renaming a worksheet, copying a worksheet, repositioning worksheets in a workbook, and changing the tabs of the worksheet. So first I should point out that Customer Tracker June 24, that's the name of our workbook. And in our workbook, we have currently one sheet that by default is named Sheet 1. You can add multiple sheets to a workbook by clicking the plus sign. If I click the plus sign, it will add Sheet 2, and this is a blank sheet starting from scratch, having to reformat everything. I am going to show you how to rename a sheet so that it has a little bit more meaning than Sheet 1 or Sheet 2. I'm going to right click here and click rename. I'm going to name this June 24. I'm going to then add another sheet, but I'm not going to actually hit the plus sign because I want to copy the same format that this looks like. I want to see the header up here. I want to see my columns. I want to see this color coding of the customer names column. And I want to use this kind of as a template each day to go in and add my customers. So I want to add multiple sheets that look like this, but so that I don't have to go in and customize them individually each day. So I'm going to right click on June 24 and I'm going to click Move or Copy. Then I'm going to click Create Copy and I'm going to select OK. So now it gave us a copy of June 24 and you'll see in parentheses it also put a 2 beside it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click it, I'm going to rename it, and this one I'm going to name June 25. And I want another copy of this same template. I'm going to move or copy again, create a copy, click OK. And this one says June 25 with a 2 in it. I'm going to rename it June 26. So if I don't like this order, because maybe today is June 24th and I want to work from today's date, you can reposition these worksheets. And all you have to do is to click on the one you want. It'll have a little paper that shows up, and I can move this to the very front. And now I got to put June 25th in between the 24th and the 26th. And so now I've got June 24th, June 25th, June 26th. And you'll see here that these are the exact same worksheet. So on June 24th, when I see Jane Doe, I can put her information. And then on the 25th, when I see John Doe, I can add his information. And then on June 26th, when I see John Smith, I can put his information. So each of these dates now have different information, but the format stayed the same. The end of the month, you know, maybe I want to have a different kind of report. So I could rename this sheet. Oops. Rename, let me click it again. Report for June, and maybe there's some different information that I want to put here, you know, total number of customers seen on different days, or if there's different charts or graphs, etc. You could create how you want this page formatted. Now what happens is a lot of times when you have to send these workbooks to maybe a boss or another coworker, etc., a lot of times they don't realize there are multiple sheets, because a lot of times we think we see, you know, exactly, or we get exactly what we see. And so one way you can make those tabs or those worksheets a little bit more noticeable so they realize there's more to what you're sending them is to give it a color. And if you right click it, you can click Tab Color. And so maybe you want to make June yellow, or not June 24th yellow. And maybe you want to make another one red, another one green, and another one, let's go with purple. So now when they get this document and it's sent to them, these colors at the bottom are going to stick out, and they're going to realize, oh, these are just the customers for June 24th, not the whole month of June, and that you have it broken down into separate days. That sums up how you would rename a worksheet, how you copy a worksheet, how you reposition them, and how you change the tab colors. Always remember, when you get an Excel document, you have the workbook and worksheets, and to double check to make sure that you haven't missed a worksheet down at the bottom. During this exercise, we're going to show you how to sort data both alphabetically and numerically. how to use the filter feature, freeze on-screen view, and how to use the zoom function. First, we'll start with sorting alphabetically. I'm going to take the vehicle column, and that's A2 through A100. I'm going to highlight that here for us. Once I've got this highlighted, we're going to go up to our ribbon, and we're going to go to the Data tab. You'll find this Sort and Filter group, and then you can just click A to Z. Now, it will usually give you this warning, and I want to explain the warning so you know how to answer this question. You do want to click Expand Selection and Sort, and the reason for that is you want these other columns to follow that line. For example, since it's covering the top one here, if we wanted the information for the Volkswagen to follow the city it's in, the phone number, etc., you want to expand the selection. Otherwise, it will sort it, but it's going to have the wrong city and the other wrong information if you do not do that, if you just stick with the current selection. So we will expand it because we want the correct info, and then we'll click Sort. So now it is in alphabetical order from A to Z here. If you wanted to put it in reverse alphabetical order, it's very similar. You would just click the Z to A option. You would also continue to click Expand the Selection. And now our vehicle starts with the Volvo here. If you would like to sort in numerical order, let's take the phone number for example. We would highlight that column. And then you could also click Sort A to Z, which will also sort numerically. You still want to expand the selection so the content stays with the correct vehicle. And now our phone numbers start with 1, and we can see that. So whether it's a price you're looking at or some other type of ranking that you're trying to put in a numerical order, you can also sort A to Z, and it will sort it numerically as well. So let's talk about using a filter. If we click on cell A1, this is going to allow us to set up a filtering system to filter for various options. So you would also go to the Data tab, the Sort and Filter group. We would click the funnel that says Filter. It's going to give it a little drop down, and you'll notice that little drop down occurred on each of these column headers. If we are filtering for the vehicle, and let's say I'm looking for a dealership that has 3 particular vehicles that I may be interested in. First, we're going to select all, so that way we can start with a blank slate here. And maybe I'm looking for a BMW, an Acura, or a Cadillac. And so I just want to know the places that offer that vehicle. Now I will click OK, and here we are. Now it has sorted for those 3 vehicle types. If you want to undo your filter, you could just click Undo here, and this also kind of shows you again that this has been filtered out. As you see, these numbers are in blue, and there's numbers in between each of these. Is essentially what that is showing here. So I'm going to click Undo the filter, so now it brings it back to the beginning here. You can also freeze panes, and so that may be something that you would want to do as well. So I'm going to select here on the View tab, go to the Windows group. So here's the Windows group. Okay, and we're going to actually click A2 because I noticed it looks like my option I'm looking for isn't available. So one moment here. Trying to figure out why it's not available. I think I know why. So it looks like we've been in page layout view. Let's click normal view. And so this is a good teaching moment. Sometimes I like it when things don't go exactly as planned. So let's see if normal view fixes this, because I was looking for a freeze pane option, which is currently grayed out. So if I click normal view, okay, our freeze pane option is there now. So we're going to actually click freeze pane, and this will give you the option to either freeze the top row or to freeze a column. So for instance, let's start with column first. So let's say we want to freeze this vehicle column. And if our data continued and we had more information clear over here, the nice thing is that your column then stays. So regardless, if I had data in this column here, if I wanted to continue to scroll over, I'm going to be able to see that information. As you see, that moves and continues to keep on going to eventually where I can't see it. I always can see column A if that column is frozen, which then allows you to move throughout the spreadsheet, especially if you have a lot of columns, and still be able to see the information. So that's the benefit of freezing the column. Now, sometimes you may actually want to freeze the top row. As you see, the top row has some important information: city, phone number, name, etc. Sometimes those headers may be even more important. We can kind of gather what the header probably would be from the information here. But when you start working with more detailed information, having this header to know what column you're even in could be important. So the nice thing about that is if you continue to scroll down on your spreadsheet, even though we get to, row 52 or whatever, we are still going to be able to see which column we are working with. So here we are, and I still know that I'm in my vehicle column, my city column, my phone, the name. If we click freeze columns again, you can unfreeze it. And so just to show you what that looks like here, if we don't have our columns frozen, eventually I don't know what these headers are. Or eventually, if I continue to scroll over, I'm not going to see column A or B or C or D, and I'm not going to have any of that information that might be important. Last but not least is how to use the zoom. And there's a couple different ways you can use the zoom on here. One is at the very bottom here in the right hand corner. You can move this sliding scale to zoom in or out. The little dash in the middle is your normal view. You can also click zoom in the view tab here under the zoom category, and you can click a zoom and you can magnify it to the percentage that you would want, whether it's smaller or larger, etc. If you click the 100, that should return it back to normal view, or you can zoom in, on a selection. So I'm going to go back to normal view, which was the 100. And then scroll back over. So here's also the little scroll thing that I just kind of want to point that out too. After what I just only had seen the D column. And so sometimes you have this bar here too, which would allow you to scroll all the way over to your A column if you're not seeing everything. Through this exercise again, we learned to sort alphabetically and numerically, to use the filter function, to freeze the panes, and how to use Zoom. For this exercise, we're going to look at how to set margins, how to set up the worksheet orientation, how to scale it to fit the page, and print and preview options for the document. For setting margins, what we'll do is we'll go to the Layout tab in the Page Setup group. And so here's the Layout tab, Page Layout, and here's our Page Setup group. We'll go to the Margins button. We'll click the drop-down arrow, and this gives you our Margins menu. You will have some options that they'll give you as defaults or some shortcut margin options here that you can just click and see, which margin you want to go with. You won't really be able to tell, as you see here, unless you go to your page layout view, what that's really even going to look like in terms of if you did normal margins, wide, narrow, for example. So if I go back to normal view, which is down here in the right hand corner, the one that says normal, if I scroll over it, you won't be able to see what you set it up until you go into the layout, page layout view, or you're in the printer preview section. So at the bottom, though, of this margins drop down, you do have where it says custom margins. So you could set up different margins if you'd like. Here it gives you the options for you to change what the margins would be: top, bottom, left, right. And so you can make them be custom margins. So I'll just go ahead and change our top and bottom. And I'm going to make them 1.5 on both ends there. So you could click Print Preview, and it's going to show you what that 1.5 top and bottom looks like if we did that. If you hit the back arrow, it will take you back to your document. I want to show you one more thing with that Print Preview. So I'm going to change this around some. Let's go maybe 1. Put the left and right at 1.25. Okay. So what I really was trying to show you, and I skipped over it again, was the center on page. You can center it horizontally. So if we check that, now let's click Print Preview. So here's what it would look like being centered on the page with those particular margins in place. I'll go ahead and hit the back button here. On the Layout tab in the Page Setup group, now what we're going to look at is the orientation of the page. So generally, when you're working in a Word document and you're typing a letter, you're most often going to have your paper in portrait orientation. Now generally for an Excel spreadsheet, because most often your paper is going more horizontally because you've got different columns going on, a lot of times you'll want to switch it to the landscape view so you can see more columns on a page. So I went ahead and I switched that to landscape. Now if we go to File and then go to Print, this is how you would go to print a document. Here's our preview of what this looks like for landscape. Again, it's centered and it's using those margins that I had set in place here. And so one reason why the landscape really works out well is, granted, we only have 4 columns here for this particular worksheet, but in many other instances you may have, 26 columns or something larger of that nature, so you could fit more columns on a page. You'll notice that you can also change the orientation when you're in this print section. So if we wanted to move it back to portrait, we could do that. And in this case, because we only have the 4 columns, it may be in our best interest to do the portrait because we can actually see more information here. We can get more vehicles on a page. It goes down here to the Chevrolet. If I put it on the landscape, we're not going to get as many vehicles on the page. So for this particular one, I probably would choose portrait if we were using this particular example. Now what you can also do is scale it to fit the page. So I'm going to go back, and in the page setup group, you can, or the page layout tab rather, I apologize. Here's our scale to fit option. You can click the height and width arrows, and you can change them to 1 page, 2 page, etc. So if we wanted to do 1 page, 1 page. Now let's click File, Print. This is what it would look like to get it all on 1 page. Obviously, this is probably not very beneficial for anybody because it's going to have a real hard time reading it. You probably have to get out a magnifying glass. And to show you what it would look like in landscape, scale to fit, this is what it would look like in the landscape version. You have much more white areas on the side for that. So we likely wouldn't want to scale it to fit 1 page. If we decided we wanted it a little bit bigger and maybe we want to scale it to fit, over 3 pages, you could make that change. And that looks more appropriate. Maybe we decide to go the 3-page route. Or 2 pages, since it's just a little snippet on the 3rd page, and see how big that allows the font to be. So once you click File, Print, and you're ready to print, this is your preview section. If you just click Print, it's going to print the document for you. This will allow you to change the number of copies you want. The up and down arrow where it says copies. Here for the printer section, tells you what printer it's going to go to. If you're at home, it's probably going to go to the only printer you may have. If you're in a workplace setting, there may be multiple printers set up. You can choose which pages are actually printed by choosing from which page to which page. You can decide if you want it printed on both sides. You can set up whether it's collated, depending on how many you put in there. We just talked about the orientation, the size of paper. You can also change the margins again. So maybe we decide, we didn't really like those margins. Now you'll see that you notice that shift here. If you do the change in the print settings, it will show you what that looks like. You also have some advanced options. If you do click the page setup blue link here, it will allow you to also change the orientation, whether it's landscape or portrait. You can adjust the scaling, look at paper size and quality, and then you've got tabs that allow you again to change the margins. You can choose whether you want it centered on the page still or not. So you see how it moved, it's not centered any longer. You can add a header and footer and some more information about the sheet and whether it prints grid lines or not. And this is one that can be handy. So I do want to point out that you can select that it does print the grid lines, because sometimes it's easier to read an Excel spreadsheet when it does have the lines. So I went ahead and made that check mark, and so now if I were to print it, it would show with these grid lines. There's one other place you can set up that setting. So I'm going to hit back. Here on the Page Layout tab, under Sheet Options, where it says Grid Lines, if you uncheck where it says Print Grid Lines, it won't print with them. If you check that in the Sheet Options, it will print with the grid lines. So you just need to determine, whether you want those lines to show up or not. I would say probably in most cases, the grid lines for the spreadsheet will come in handy. That wraps up the printing options for Excel spreadsheets, including margins, the orientation, how to scale it to fit to a page, and additional print/preview options when you go to print your document.